and welcome back to SiouxOnline.com. Today we're continuing on with the interviews of the candidates for the upcoming election. And we have with us Luke Dufour. Hello, Luke.
How's it going, Mike?
Good, thank you. You're relatively new to politics, so why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay, well, I was born and raised here in Sault Ste. Marie. I went to school here all my life. I attended Algoma University. After I graduated there, I traveled abroad, went overseas for a couple of years, and after some time doing that, I decided that I wanted to come home. I wanted to really put down some roots and invest myself back in the city that helped to raise me. And I was one of the few people who were lucky enough to get a job when I came back home. I started up working and helping to manage JL Builders, a local custom home building company here in Sault Ste. Marie. I bought a house, started paying taxes, and after a little while I started to get kind of curious. I wonder where all this tax money's going. And being a trades guy, I really like to see exactly how things work right for myself. And so I started to attend city council meetings. And one of my first impressions after attending meetings was just how surprised I was to see a real generational imbalance on council. You know what I mean? There didn't seem to be anyone there who was even close to my age or who was really representing the interests and the concerns of, you know, working people who were trying to pay off their first mortgage or start a family or start a business. And I got the wheels turning. I thought I'd really like to find a younger candidate to support in the next election. And so I started asking around, you know, contacting people, seeing if there were any younger people who were interested in running. And after a little while, it kind of started to dawn on me as people started to say, you know what, Luke, like, maybe you're the younger candidate and you should start thinking about this. So that's basically the path that led me to where I am today. I kept going to meetings. I started doing my homework, reading the budgets, following up with city planning documents and municipal act, and just trying to really do my homework in the lead up to my fall campaign.
So, having watched council and paid attention to council, how would you grade the present council? Pass or fail, and why?
It really depends on what your metric is for what you want a good council to be. These councillors have really, I feel, gone along with really anything that city staff has put forward to them. I've noticed, particularly in my ward, there hasn't seemed to be the level of engagement, even in meetings, that I would have expected from my councillor. There's a lot of summary questions, but not a whole lot of criticism when people are coming to, you know, ask for funding, coming to present new ideas. Councillors don't really seem to be engaging with them on any level, really. A good example for this, in my opinion, was when the Esposito pump track came up earlier this year, and councillors were looking at funding it with $250,000 of taxpayer money. And as timelines progressed and construction needed to start, it was only then that councillors thought to say, oh, hey, by the way, you guys could have qualified for Ontario Trillium money, but now it's too late. It was just one of those moments where I sat there in the gallery thinking, like, why didn't somebody just pick up the phone and give these people a call? You've got this great community group that fundraised over $100,000 for their project that really does benefit everyone in the city, and yet councillors who had been presented with the information never thought to reach out, you know, and try to give that extra hand to a really deserving community group.
Now, other than the youth issue, what do you think the major issues are in this election?
In this election, I think that really examining city infrastructure is a major issue. I think people really want to know why we have such a high rate of taxation, but especially this past year, people seem to really be noticing a decline in the quality of our core municipal services, things like our roads. And I think that as a councillor, where I've noticed that lack of engagement on council has especially been at tax time and during the budget. This past year at the budget meeting, you really didn't see very many councillors asking any questions at all. And when it came time to set the tax rate, of course every councillor wanted it to say 0%, right? But yet no one had any idea of how they would get there or what they would do. They were just, again, relying on city staff to already have figured out what they could possibly cut.
Now, do you think the 0% tax rate was because it was an election year?
Well, the interesting thing about the 0% tax rate is if you examine the city's own budget documents, we didn't have a 0% tax hike this past year. They didn't change the actual roll number, but if you examine the data from MPAC reassessments, we experienced a 5.03% tax raise this past year through the value of our houses being reassessed. And all the city did is just not change the level at which they tax that assessment. Mm-hmm. In addition, the only way that the city made it from a 2% tax hike to a 0% one was by taking all the money that we owed to the Ermatinger Visitor Center and rolling it into long-term debt. Now, to me as a young person sitting there, that comes across to me as really irresponsible, because when it comes time to determine how our taxes are going to be, we can't be using long-term debt as a way to lower our taxes. We need to really do what everyone else with a job in the city is doing, and that's living within our means and knowing how to balance a budget without using our credit card for our expenses.
The citizens of this city are up in arms about the quality of the water. Now, Ward 1 has the worst quality, apparently, but since moving to Ward 3, I've noticed that Ward 2 and 3 have very low quality of water.
Well, I think water quality is absolutely a huge issue for citizens in Sault Ste. Marie. I think that anytime you have something affecting people in their homes, it's really can be very distressing, and it affects people's sense of security about their own lives. And I think that especially in the issue of brown water, City Council really needed to take a stronger role in communicating with their constituents about what PUC's plans were to address water quality and how that was going to happen. I've been hearing a lot of stories about people who just didn't hear about boil water advisories and got sick. People who had no idea that a brown water event was scheduled for their area and then found things ruined. And this is another example of where I feel like the councillors were just disengaged from the process. They perhaps didn't fully understand what they should have been learning at the PUC board meetings, and they certainly weren't communicating it in ways that their constituents understood on the street.
Are you hoping that the water quality for 4, 5, and 6 stay at least at the level that it is now and don't get any worse?
Oh, of course. I would certainly be hoping that, and I think that there is reason to believe that the water quality issue should be resolved in the next 4 months, I believe it is, the PUC is saying, which is a very long time, but I'm absolutely hoping for an increase in the quality, not just for it to stay the same.
Ward 6 has been working with one councillor for the last couple of years. Frank Manzo's been off sick. Do you think that the Sault Ste. Marie should go to a one councillor per ward system?
I think that having one councillor per ward could be something to examine in the future, but right now I really feel that before we change the structure of council, we really need to work on changing the culture of council. And when you look at the culture of council right now, I mean, you've got a lot of people on there with very strong opinions, definitely some real characters, and it almost seems to me as though, like you mentioned Frank Manzo, as though we had the Sioux Greyhounds draft all enforcers one year. You know what I mean? We get a product, it'd be super entertaining hockey. You'd have big hits, lots of fireworks, lots of fights, but when it came time to the playoffs, Sault Ste. Marie would be on the outside looking in. And when I apply that to council, I really see that for a lot of years we've kind of got by that way, and I think it's time to find some people who are good young forwards and can score some goals and move our city forward.
Would you like to say something to your constituents?
I would. I'd like to take this opportunity to ask the people in Ward 4 for their support for a new voice and a new face on City Council, one who has significant management experience, who is committed to seeing our budgets balanced without using long-term debt, someone who's committed to improving our downtown, which should really be the jewel of our city. I'm also committed to supporting the citizens in my ward throughout all of my term.
Thank you.